Hello again, everyone. I'm Lucas Berry, and you're watching Train Time on the New River Network. You know, you may have noticed recently that we did the Fayetteville 4th of July parade, and in the broadcast, I talked about how I would imagine that a parade is a great opportunity for law enforcement and first responders to present themselves in a positive light. Because for most of us, when we encounter these folks, something bad has happened, right? Well, it just so happens there are two locomotives that are out there doing the exact same thing for those departments all around the country. CSX 911 and 3194 honor our first responders and law enforcement respectively. And they've been to West Virginia over the last couple of years, and that's what we're going to take a look at in this episode. We'll be chasing 911 from Thurman to near Pax on the R.J. Corman line, and we'll check out 3194 on the main line. So without further ado, let's get going, and let's take a look at what CSX calls their pride and service locomotives. These locomotives were painted at the Huntington shops in 2019. And there are three of them. We've seen 1776, the Spirit of Our Armed Forces, in a past episode or two. So we won't be seeing that here today, but I do want to present what I call two of the three Huntington sisters. I got that name from someone else on YouTube, but I like it, so we're going to stick with it. Here's two of the three Huntington sisters, CSX 911 and CSX 3194. Our first locomotive is CSX number 911, the Spirit of Our First Responders. We're down here in Thurman on a late September morning in 2022 waiting for the engine to appear after running around its train parked in restaurant siding. After they get permission from the dispatcher, they'll back onto their train and then pull for the mine with 911 showing the way in that unmissable red paint. You know, waiting on a fire truck painted engine here in Thurman reminds me of a story I once read about when there was a fire in town, and to put it out they put a hose up to the water supply of the coaling tower. And that worked fine until a train came through and snapped the hose into three pieces. Alright, they're now tied onto the train and getting ready to leave. So with that, I hit the road for my first shot. I'm right outside town where RJ Woolman crosses Thurman Road. I wanted a shot of the engine coming around the curfew and to showcase the side of the engine more. Plus, I like the horn 911 has, and the best place to hear a horn is a grade crossing. You might remember this spot at the entrance to the National Park property where we got one of the other Pride and Service locomotives, CSX 1776 here, and later CSX's Conrail Heritage Unit, both on loaded coal trains. This time the train is empty and going in the opposite direction as those two, and with the morning light it almost feels dreamlike, at least to me. We move up to Mount Hope now, and looking back, I absolutely should have filmed at the fire department instead of here at Virginia Street. Oh well, the train is passing the former Mount Hope High School, and with that, I think of the many future firefighters who went to school here. I can't imagine many pay much mind to the trains that pass their school, and if they did, I'll bet none ever envisioned there'd be a locomotive painted like a fire truck on that line. We move up the line to my old favorite Blake Hollow Road, and we're now on the main line of what once was the Kanawha Glenjean and Eastern Railroad. The KGJ&E was completed in 1913 and was built by Mr. Thomas McKell, who was put off by freight rates given him by the Chesapeake and Ohio. He said, well, I've got the money, I'll build my own railroad, and that's exactly what he did. The road was not that big, only about 15 miles or so, and with that it only needed about 5 locomotives and 200 coal cars to do the work. But it was loved in its day. Its passenger trains were quaint, but useful and well liked. After McKell's death, his railroad was sold to, of all things, the C&O. By the time our train gets here, they've put the R.J. Corman locomotives on the train. These are the older locomotives we saw in a prior video, not the bigger SD70Ms. Some 8 months later, in April 2023, CSX 3194 got itself into call service and was coming east with a loaded train. So I rushed to Thurman to get it, and then had to wait a while. Oh well, it was absolutely worth it. This was the second eastbound trip 3194 had made leading. The first one was made at like 2 a.m., which is a little past this guy's bedtime. This trip rolled through at about 9:20 p.m., so we're getting earlier in the day. Maybe one day it'll come through leading in daylight. Some 10 days later, I was in Montgomery because I wanted to see 3194 in daylight. It wasn't leading, but it stood out in the last trip of train E895, empties from Newport News to Princeton, Indiana. This train would again split in Russell, Kentucky, with half going to Indiana and half going to the Kentucky coal fields, including 3194. next stop for E895 is Russell, Kentucky, and I found out later 3194 will be cut off from the train at Russell and sent down to the Kentucky coal fields. In the steam era, though, this train would not be blowing through Montgomery, but would instead be slowing down for a stop at Hanley. At one point, Hanley was the division point not only of the New River and Kanawha subdivisions, but also the Hinton and Huntington divisions of the Chesapeake and Ohio. Hanley was where locomotives were changed for the next portion of the trip. The people here in Montgomery didn't even seem to notice this train moving through town. To rail fans like us, this is a special thing, special locomotive or not. But to the people who aren't rail fans, whose lives take place within sight or earshot of the tracks, it's just a train and just another part of the soundtrack of their lives. As this train continues westbound, please join me in saluting all of our first responders and law enforcement. Thank you for all you do. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy the program and would like to watch past episodes, I invite you to check out our Facebook page. You can check us out on YouTube as well, the New River Network, watchnrn.com, our Roku channel, and you can get us on cable here in Fayette County. Share on Phone Plateau Channel 17 down in the valley. So, for the New River Network, I'm Lucas Berry, reminding you that anytime, it's train time.